She was 7 months pregnant when her millionaire husband walked into the nursery and said 5 words that destroyed her world. "Put that down. You won't be needing it." Carolyn Mitchell had spent 3 weeks assembling that crib, 3 weeks choosing the perfect paint color, 3 weeks imagining her daughter sleeping beneath dancing felt elephants. But Bradley Ashford had other plans. He wanted a divorce. He had been cheating for 8 months, and he wanted her out of the house before the baby arrived. No money, no home, no future. His mother watched her pack 2 suitcases like a prison warden, told her the prenup was clear. She entered the marriage with nothing. She would leave with nothing. But there was one thing they forgot about: a small cardboard box in the back of her closet, her late father's belongings, things Bradley had called worthless junk. Inside that box was a faded business card, just an old piece of cardstock that everyone said meant nothing. Everyone was wrong, because hidden on that card was a secret her father had kept for 30 years. A secret that would expose the Ashford family's darkest crimes. A secret that would turn a discarded pregnant wife into the most dangerous enemy Bradley Ashford ever made. What happens when a quiet accountant spends 3 decades preparing for the day his daughter might need to fight back? What happens when a woman who lost everything discovers she holds the key to destroying an empire? And what happens when the man who threw away his pregnant wife realizes that the worthless card he told her to leave behind was actually a loaded weapon pointed directly at his heart? Stay with me for the next 90 minutes, because this story will take you through betrayal, heartbreak, and the kind of revenge that comes not from anger, but from truth. This is the story of Caroline Mitchell, the woman who rose from the ashes of her shattered marriage to become something her husband never expected. A mother, a survivor, a force of nature, and it all started with a worthless card. "Put that down," Bradley's voice cut through the nursery like a blade. "You won't be needing it." Carolyn Mitchell froze mid-motion, the delicate mobile dangling from her fingertips. Little felt elephants swayed gently in the afternoon light streaming through the window. She had spent 3 weeks assembling this crib, 3 weeks choosing the perfect shade of sage green for the walls, 3 weeks imagining her daughter sleeping peacefully beneath these dancing elephants. 7 months pregnant, baby shower scheduled for tomorrow, 43 guests confirmed. She turned slowly, one hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly. Bradley stood in the doorway wearing his golf clothes, navy polo, khaki shorts, the Rolex she had given him for their 3rd anniversary catching the sunlight. He looked like he always did after 18 holes, relaxed, satisfied, like a man without a care in the world. "What do you mean?" Carrie asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin, uncertain. Bradley stepped into the nursery. His eyes swept across the room she had decorated with such care. The changing table, the rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother, the bookshelf already filled with picture books she couldn't wait to read aloud. "I want a divorce," he said. The words came out flat, clinical, like he was ordering a sandwich. Carrie laughed, the sound a shape before she could stop it. Nervous, disbelieving, a reflex born of shock rather than amusement. "That's not funny, Bradley." "I'm not joking." He slid his hands into his pockets. "I've met someone. I've been seeing her for 8 months. The marriage is over." The mobile slipped from Carrie's fingers. Little felt elephants scattered across the hardwood floor. She watched them fall in slow motion, tumbling end over end like her entire world was tumbling with them. "This isn't happening. This cannot be happening." 8 months, she repeated. Her brain struggled to process the timeline. 8 months ago, they had celebrated their 5th anniversary in the Maldives. 8 months ago, he had held her hand over dinner and talked about trying for a baby. 8 months ago, she had believed she was the luckiest woman alive. "You heard me." Bradley checked his Rolex, a quick, impatient glance, like he had somewhere more important to be. Carrie pressed her palm against her belly. The baby kicked. Once, twice, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this body, that there was a tiny life depending on her to make sense of what was happening. "I'm carrying your child," she said. "We're having a daughter. The shower's tomorrow. 43 people are coming." "Cancel it." "Bradley," her voice cracked. "Please, whatever this is, whatever's happening, we can work through it. We can go to counseling. We can—" "I've already spoken to my attorney." He cut her off without raising his voice, without even looking at her. I want this finalized before the baby arrives. It'll be cleaner that way. Cleaner, like their marriage was a spill to be wiped up, like their daughter was an inconvenience to schedule around. What about the house? Carrie heard herself ask. The question seemed absurd, irrelevant, but her mind grasped for practical details because the emotional reality was too enormous to hold. The house is Ashford property, always has been. You'll need to leave. Leave where? Bradley shrugged, one shoulder lifting and falling like the answer didn't concern him. That's not really my concern anymore, Caroline. He hadn't called her Caroline since their first date. Since he had smiled across a candle-lit table and said her full name, made her sound like a princess. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and smiled. That smile, the one that used to make her heart flutter. The one she hadn't seen directed at her in months. Hey, babe. His voice softened as he answered. Warmed. Became the voice of the man she had married. Yeah, I told her. I'll be home soon. Home. He already had a home with someone else. Carrie stood motionless as he ended the call, as he turned and walked out of the nursery without looking back. As his footsteps faded down the hallway and the front door opened and closed, the house fell silent. She lowered herself to the floor, her pregnant body awkward and heavy. The felt elephants lay scattered around her like casualties of a war she hadn't known she was fighting. Her phone sat on the changing table. The screen lit up with notifications. Messages from guests confirming tomorrow's shower. Questions about parking. Excitement about finally meeting the mama-to-be. 43 people would learn that her husband left his pregnant wife for someone else. 43 people would whisper behind her back. 43 reasons to feel humiliated. But it wasn't the humiliation that broke her first sob loose. It was the realization that she had known. Somewhere deep down beneath the denial and the hope and the desperate need to believe in her marriage, she had known something was wrong. The late nights, the distracted silences, the way he looked through her instead of at her. She had ignored every sign. She had explained away every doubt. She had chosen blindness because the alternative was too terrifying to face. And now the alternative had found her anyway. Carrie sat on the nursery floor surrounded by elephants and cried until her throat was raw, until the sun set through the window and the room grew dark, until the baby kicked again, harder this time, demanding attention. She placed both hands on her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered to her daughter. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happens now. The baby shifted, a tiny movement that felt almost like reassurance. 3 hours had passed. The night pressed against the windows, and somewhere out there, Bradley was with another woman, in another home, living another life that didn't include his pregnant wife. Carrie pulled herself up using the crib railing. Her legs trembled, her head pounded from crying. She needed to think, needed to plan, needed to figure out what came next. But first, she needed to call someone who would tell her the truth, someone who wouldn't sugarcoat the devastation or minimize the betrayal. She needed Maggie. The sound of the doorbell made Carrie jump. She had been sitting in the dark living room for 2 hours, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything except stare at the wall and try to breathe. Bradley had returned, with his mother. Evelyn Ashford swept into the house like she owned it, which technically she did. The Westchester estate had been in the Ashford family for 3 generations. Carrie had been living in her in-laws' property for 5 years without fully realizing she was merely a guest. Well, Evelyn surveyed the living room with barely concealed disdain. I suppose we should discuss the practicalities. Carrie rose slowly from the couch. Her eyes found Bradley, searching for some sign of the man she had married. Some flicker of remorse, some hesitation. He was texting on his phone. You have until tomorrow evening to pack your belongings, Evelyn said. Bradley will be staying at my apartment tonight. The movers will need access to assess which items are Ashford property. Which items? Carrie's voice came out flat. Everything in this house was either chosen by Bradley or given to us by your family. Precisely. Evelyn smiled, a thin, cold expression that never reached her eyes. The prenup was quite clear, dear. You entered this marriage with nothing. You leave with nothing. The prenup. Carrie remembered signing it in Bradley's lawyer's office. She remembered feeling uneasy, feeling rushed, feeling like asking too many questions would make her seem greedy or untrusting. She remembered Bradley assuring her it was just a formality, that they would be together forever, that the document would never matter. "I'm 7 months pregnant," Carrie said, "with your grandchild." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "Bradley will provide reasonable child support. That was always part of the agreement." The agreement? Carrie looked between mother and son. "You've been planning this." Bradley finally looked up from his phone. "Don't be dramatic, Carrie. I'm trying to make this as painless as possible." Painless? The word tasted like ash in her mouth. "You're throwing your pregnant wife out of her home for a younger woman, and you want it to be painless." "You have 2 suitcases," Evelyn interjected. "Pack what you need, leave the jewelry." It was all gifts from Bradley. Carrie's hand moved unconsciously to her wedding ring. The 3-carat diamond Bradley had presented on bended knee in Central Park. The ring she had worn proudly for 5 years. "You should leave that as well," Evelyn said, watching the gesture. "It's a family heirloom." Something shifted in Carrie's chest, a small, hard kernel of anger pushing up through the shock and grief. She pulled off the ring, set it on the coffee table with a soft clink. "Take it," she said. "Take all of it. I don't want anything that reminds me of this family." Bradley actually looked surprised, like he had expected her to fight, to beg, to give him the satisfaction of seeing her desperate. She turned and walked upstairs to pack. The closet in the master bedroom had seemed enormous when Carrie first moved in. A walk-in paradise filled with designer clothes and shoes she had never dreamed of owning. Now it felt like a mausoleum. Every item a reminder of who she had tried to become. The wife Bradley wanted, the woman who fit into the Ashford world. She pulled open drawers mechanically, maternity clothes, underwear, the comfortable loungewear Bradley always criticized as frumpy. 2 suitcases. That was what her 5-year marriage had been reduced to. 2 suitcases and whatever she could carry. In the back corner of the closet, behind shoes she never wore, Carrie found a small cardboard box. It had been there since her father's funeral 2 years ago. Bradley had called it junk and told her to throw it away. She never did. Carrie sank to the closet floor and opened the box with trembling hands. Inside, her father's reading glasses, a pocket watch that hadn't worked in decades, his favorite pen, the one he used to sign every birthday card, and a worn leather business card holder. Harold Mitchell had been a quiet man, an accountant at a small firm. He lived modestly, spoke softly, and never asked for attention. When he died of a heart attack 2 years ago, Carrie had been devastated. But Bradley had rushed her through the grieving, told her to focus on the future, told her dwelling on the past was unhealthy. She opened the card holder, one card inside, faded, yellowed with age. Harold Mitchell, CPA, a phone number that had been disconnected for at least 20 years. "What's that?" Carrie startled. Evelyn stood in the closet doorway, watching with sharp eyes. "Nothing." Carrie tucked the card in her pocket. "Just my father's old things." "Leave the junk. You are wasting time." Carrie looked at her mother-in-law, really looked at her. The perfectly styled silver hair, the designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, the absolute certainty that she was entitled to control everyone around her. "No," Carrie said. Evelyn blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Carrie closed the box and tucked it into her suitcase. "These are my father's belongings. They have nothing to do with your family. I'm taking them." For a moment, Evelyn looked almost impressed. Then her face hardened. "Fine, take your junk, but be out by tomorrow evening, or I'll have security escort you off the property." She turned and left. Carrie heard her heels clicking down the hallway, heard her voice murmuring to Bradley, heard them both leave through the front door, alone again. Carrie finished packing in silence. She moved through the house like a ghost, touching surfaces she would never touch again. The kitchen where she had learned to cook Bradley's favorite meals. The study where she had waited up for him during late nights at the office. The living room where they had decorated their first Christmas tree together. Lies. All of it had been lies. At 11:43 p.m. the doorbell rang. Carrie opened it to find Maggie Sullivan standing on the porch with fire in her eyes and an overnight bag over her shoulder. "I got your text," Maggie said. "Get your stuff. You're not spending another minute in this house." Carrie had sent one message before Bradley and Evelyn arrived. 2 words. He left me. Maggie had driven 2 hours from Manhattan without asking a single question. The prenup, Carrie started. I don't care about the prenup right now. Maggie pushed past her into the foyer. Where are your bags? Upstairs. But Maggie, they said I have until tomorrow. They can say whatever they want. Maggie was already heading for the stairs. You're not staying in a house where they're treating you like furniture to be removed. We're leaving tonight. 20 minutes later, 2 suitcases were loaded into Maggie's car. Carrie took one last look at the house that had been her home for 5 years. The nursery window glowed faintly in the darkness. The room she would never put her daughter to sleep in. The crib she had assembled with such hope. Carrie, Maggie's voice was gentle but firm. We need to go. Carrie got in the car. Maggie pulled out of the driveway without looking back. As Manhattan grew closer, Carrie reached into her pocket. Her father's business card felt warm against her fingers. She pulled it out, examining it in the passing streetlights. Harold Mitchell, CPA. A disconnected number. A piece of cardstock that meant nothing to anyone except her. But Harold had kept this card for 30 years. And when he gave Carrie his things before he died, when the morphine was clouding his mind and his words came out jumbled and strange, he had pressed this card holder into her palm. When everything falls apart, sweetheart, he had whispered. Call the number on the back. Carrie had checked the back of the card years ago, just blank cardstock. She had dismissed his words as medication confusion, the ramblings of a dying man. Now, sitting in Maggie's passenger seat with her life in shambles, she pulled out the card again. The street lights flashed across it rhythmically. Light and shadow. Light and shadow. And in that strobe effect, she saw it. Faint impressions in the cardstock. Numbers. Pressed so lightly they were invisible unless the light hit just right. Carrie's breath caught. What is it? Maggie asked, glancing over. I don't know. Carrie tilted the card, watching the hidden numbers appear and disappear. But I think I need to find out. The suitcase was too small. That's what finally broke her. Carrie stood in the middle of Maggie's guest bedroom, staring at the 2 suitcases that contained everything she had left from 5 years of marriage. 2 suitcases, 40 pounds of clothing and memories, less than what most people took on vacation. She opened the larger one to find something to sleep in. Her hand brushed against the cardboard box. Her father's things. The dam broke. Carrie sank onto the bed and sobbed. Great, heaving cries that shook her entire body. The baby moved restlessly, responding to her distress, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything except drown in the enormity of what had happened. Maggie appeared in the doorway. She didn't say anything. Didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. She simply sat down on the bed, wrapped an arm around Carrie's shoulders, and let her cry. How long? Carrie finally managed. How long did you suspect? Maggie was silent for a moment. About a year. A year? Carrie wiped her face with shaking hands. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? The question hung in the air. They both knew the answer. I gave up everything for him. Carrie said. Her voice was raw. My career, my apartment, my independence. He said he wanted a wife who could focus on the family. On him. And you believed him. I loved him, Maggie, or I thought I did. Carrie pressed her palms against her eyes. Maybe I just loved the idea of him, the stability, the security, the life he promised. Maggie squeezed her shoulder. That's not a crime. That's being human. I should have seen the signs. Maybe, or maybe you weren't ready to see them. Maggie turned to face her. Listen to me. You're going to want to blame yourself. You're going to replay every moment and wonder what you could have done differently. But right now, that doesn't help. Right now, you need to focus on one thing. What? Surviving the next 24 hours. Carrie looked at her friend, her best friend since college, the woman who had driven 2 hours in the middle of the night without being asked. I don't know how to do this, Carrie whispered. I don't know how to be alone. You're not alone, Maggie's voice was fierce. You have me. You have that baby. And tomorrow we're going to find you a lawyer who will make Bradley Ashford regret the day he was born. Carrie almost smiled. Almost. The prenup, she started again. Forget the prenup for tonight. Take a shower, eat something, Try to sleep. Maggie stood. Tomorrow we fight. Tonight we rest. After Maggie left, Carrie sat on the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from baby shower guests confirming the party that would never happen. She couldn't answer, couldn't explain, couldn't find the words to describe how a person could disappear inside their own marriage so completely that when it ended, they didn't know who they were anymore. The card sat on the nightstand where she had left it, her father's last gift, his cryptic words echoing in her memory. When everything falls apart, sweetheart. Well, Dad, Carrie thought, everything just fell apart. The motel room smelled like regret and industrial cleaner. Carrie had insisted on leaving Maggie's apartment the next morning. Her friend had protested, but Carrie couldn't bear to be a burden, couldn't stand the pitying looks, couldn't pretend to be okay when everything inside her was screaming. The Sunrise Motor Lodge was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place where people came to disappear. Carrie paid for 3 nights in cash and carried her suitcases to a room on the second floor. The bed sagged in the middle. The carpet was stained in ways she didn't want to examine. The bathroom light flickered ominously. But it had a phone, a landline with a rotary dial that looked older than she was. Carrie pulled out her father's card, tilted it under the lamp until the hidden numbers appeared. Her heart pounded as she dialed. It was 3:14 in the morning. No one would answer. The number was probably disconnected. This was probably a waste of time, just another dead end in a life that had become nothing but dead ends. The phone rang once, twice. Someone picked up on the third ring. Mitchell Protocol. The voice was male, clear and alert, as if he had been waiting for this call. Identification required. Carrie's throat tightened. My father was Harold Mitchell. He gave me a card before he died. He said to call this number when everything fell apart. A long pause. The line crackled faintly. Caroline. The man's voice softened. I've been waiting for you to call. My name is Walter Brennan. I worked with your father for 42 years. Carrie gripped the phone receiver so hard, her knuckles turned white. I don't understand. My father was an accountant, a regular accountant at a small firm. Walter chuckled. The sound was warm and sad. Is that what you believed? That's what everyone believed. Then Harold did his job well. Another pause. How much do you know about your father's work, Carolyn? He did taxes, audits, bookkeeping for small businesses. That was his cover, his public face. Walter's voice grew serious. Your father was a forensic accountant, one of the best in the country. He specialized in tracking hidden assets and uncovering financial crimes. He worked with federal agencies for decades, witness protection, criminal investigations, cases that required absolute discretion. Carrie sank onto the sagging bed. The room spun around her. That's impossible. He was just a quiet man who went to work and came home. He never talked about anything exciting or dangerous. That's because he understood that the most dangerous thing in his line of work was attention. Harold kept his head down, lived modestly, trusted almost no one. Walter's voice caught, but he trusted me, and apparently he trusted you enough to give you that number. Why would he need me to have it? Because of your husband. Walter said the word husband like it tasted sour. Harold knew about the Ashfords. He'd been tracking them for nearly 30 years. Carrie's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's shock. Tracking them for what? Their real estate empire was built on fraud, Caroline. Money laundering, tax evasion, connections to organized crime. Douglas Ashford, your father-in-law, was the architect. Bradley has been groomed to take over. You're saying my husband is a criminal. I'm saying your husband comes from a family of criminals who have spent 3 decades hiding their crimes. And your father spent those same 30 years documenting every single one. Carrie closed her eyes. Memories flooded back. Her father at her wedding. Quiet as always, standing in the corner with a glass of champagne he never drank. She had interpreted his silence as shyness, his reluctance to engage with Bradley's family as social awkwardness. Now she wondered if it had been something else entirely. He never approved of Bradley, she whispered. He couldn't stop you, Walter said gently. Free will. He respected that, even when it broke his heart. But he could prepare for the day you might need help. What kind of help? There's a safety deposit box in Manhattan, First Federal Bank on Lexington Avenue, box 743. Your father put everything there, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence the Ashfords have spent 30 years trying to hide. Carrie's breath caught. And the card? The card is your key. It has an embedded chip that will verify your identity. Without it, no one can access the box. The worthless card, the junk Bradley told her to throw away. The piece of cardstock that everyone had dismissed as meaningless. Her father had given her a weapon, and she hadn't even known it existed. What am I supposed to do with this information? Carrie asked. That's up to you. Walter's voice was careful, neutral. You could ignore it. Walk away, take whatever settlement Bradley offers, and start over somewhere else. Or you could fight back. Use what your father gave you. Make the Ashfords face consequences for the first time in their lives. He paused. But I won't pretend that path is easy or safe. These are powerful people with powerful friends. They will try to destroy you. Carrie looked around the shabby motel room, the water-stained ceiling, the thin curtains that didn't quite close, the life she had been reduced to in the span of 24 hours. They already destroyed me, she said. What else can they take? Your daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. Carrie's hand tightened on her belly. They wouldn't. Bradley wants the divorce finalized before the baby arrives for a reason, Carolyn. He's not trying to be kind. He's trying to establish terms before you have any leverage. Once that child is born, everything changes. Custody becomes a battleground, and the Ashfords have resources most people can't imagine. Carrie stared at the wall. A crack ran from floor to ceiling, branching like lightning. I need to see what's in that box, she said. The bank opens at 9. I'll meet you there. Walter gave her the address. And Caroline? Yes? Your father loved you more than anything in this world. He spent 30 years hoping you would never need what he prepared. But he was ready. He was always ready. The line went dead. Carrie sat in the darkness, holding the phone receiver long after the connection ended. The streetlight outside buzzed with that particular frequency of cheap neighborhoods. Distant sirens wailed and faded. She should sleep. The baby needed rest. She needed rest. But her father's face kept swimming up from memory. Every birthday when he arrived with a modest gift and a proud smile. Every graduation where he sat in the back row with tears in his eyes. Every time she called, crying about something Bradley said or did, and Harold just listened. Never judged, never said I told you so. He had known. All that time, he had known exactly what Bradley was. And instead of driving her away with accusations, instead of demanding she leave a man she loved, he had simply waited for her to be ready. Carrie pressed her face into the flat motel pillow and cried again. But these tears were different. These tears carried something besides grief. They carried the first fragile stirrings of hope. First Federal Bank occupied a building that didn't advertise itself. No grand entrance, no polished marble, just a plain glass door on a quiet stretch of Lexington Avenue that most people walk past without noticing. Carrie arrived at 8:53. Walter Brennan was already waiting on the sidewalk. He was older than she had imagined, white-haired and slightly stooped, with the kind of face that disappeared in a crowd. He wore a gray suit that was perfectly pressed, but at least a decade out of fashion. Caroline, he took her hand in both of his. His grip was warm and surprisingly strong. You look just like your mother. Carrie blinked. You knew my mother? I knew both your parents, before they married, before you were born. Walter's eyes grew distant. Your mother was the only person who ever matched Harold for stubbornness. She knew what he did, supported it completely. When she died, he trailed off. Carrie's mother had passed when Carrie was 3. She had no real memories of her, just photographs and stories her father told. Harold was never quite the same after, Walter finished. But he kept working, kept watching, kept preparing for this day. For this specific day? For the day you would need him. Walter gestured toward the bank entrance. Shall we? Inside, the bank was as unremarkable as its exterior. Low ceilings, harsh fluorescent lighting, a handful of bored-looking employees. Walter led Carrie to a counter, where a young woman checked their identification with mechanical efficiency. The card worked exactly as Walter had described. When Carrie pressed it against a small black panel, something clicked inside the cardstock. A light turned green. The clerk nodded and led them through a heavy door. Box 743 was in the lowest level, a vault within a vault. The air was cool and dry, thick with the smell of old paper and metal. Carrie turned her key. The box slid out with a soft hiss. Inside, she found 3 flash drives wrapped in protective casing, copies of documents spanning 3 decades, photographs, audio recordings on formats that ranged from cassette tapes to digital files, and a handwritten letter in her father's cramped, familiar script. "Sweetheart," she read aloud. Her voice cracked on the word. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and you're in trouble. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from making this mistake, but I can help you survive it. Everything you need is in this box. The Ashfords have been operating a criminal enterprise for 31 years. Real estate fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. I documented it all. Names, dates, account numbers, connections. Enough to bring down their entire operation. You have 2 choices. You can take this to a lawyer and negotiate a fair settlement. The threat alone should be enough to guarantee you and your child are protected. Or you can take this to federal investigators and end the Ashfords forever. That path is harder, more dangerous. But you were always braver than you knew, Caroline. Braver than I ever told you. Whatever you choose, know that I love you. I always did. I always will. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see my grandchild. Tell her about me sometimes. Tell her that her grandfather was a quiet man who noticed things, who kept track of details, who believed that truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. All my love, Dad." Carrie read the letter 3 times. Her hands trembled so badly the paper shook. Mistake. He had called her marriage a mistake. Not her, not her judgment, not her character. The marriage, the situation. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel crazy. All those moments when Bradley made her feel irrational. All those arguments where he twisted her words until she didn't know what was real. All those nights lying awake wondering if something was wrong with her. Her father had seen it, had known it, had prepared for the day when she would finally see it too. "I need copies of everything," Carrie said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "And a lawyer who isn't afraid of powerful people." Walter nodded slowly. "I know someone. James Hartley. He's handled difficult cases before, complex divorces with criminal entanglements. Can he be trusted? He's one of the only people your father ever trusted outside of me." Walter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This won't be easy, Caroline. The Ashfords will fight with everything they have." Carrie looked at the box full of evidence. 30 years of crimes documented by the most detail-oriented man she had ever known. "Let them fight," she said. "I have 30 years of ammunition." Back at Maggie's apartment, they spread the documents across the dining table. Maggie had insisted Carrie return, had practically dragged her out of the motel with threats and guilt and the reminder that pregnant women shouldn't be living in places that rented by the hour. Now Maggie stood over the table, her lawyer's brain working overtime. "Carrie," her voice was awed and horrified, "do you understand what this is? The Ashfords could go to prison. Bradley included." "Good." The word came out before Carrie could stop it, sharp and cold and absolutely certain. Maggie stared at her. Carrie stared back. "Good," Carrie repeated. "They threw me out like garbage. They're trying to take my daughter. They spent our entire marriage lying to me." She pressed her palms flat against the table. "So yes, good. I want them to face consequences. This goes beyond divorce court. This is federal territory, RICO charges, money laundering, fraud. I know. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. They'll come after you with everything. Smear campaigns, custody threats. You'll be dragged through every form of hell they can devise." Carrie thought about the nursery, the felt elephants scattered on the floor, Bradley's cold voice telling her she was nothing, Evelyn's satisfied smile as she supervised the packing. "I was already in hell," Carrie said. "I just didn't know it." Her phone buzzed, a text from Bradley, the first contact since he walked out. She opened it to find a photo. Tiffany Reeves, the 26-year-old Instagram model, sunbathing by the pool at the Westchester house. The pool where Carrie had planned to teach her daughter to swim. The house where she had imagined growing old. The caption read, "Moved on, you should too." Something crystallized in Carrie's chest, cold and clear, and absolutely still. The last remnants of love, of hope, of any lingering belief that this might be a misunderstanding. Gone, replaced by something harder. She screenshot the message, added it to the folder on her phone, evidence. "Call James Hartley," Carrie said. "Tell him I'm ready to fight." James Hartley's office was in Midtown Manhattan, tucked into a building that housed lawyers, accountants, and the occasional therapist who specialized in divorce trauma. The irony wasn't lost on Carrie. Hartley himself was in his mid-50s, with silver at his temples and the kind of tired eyes that came from decades of seeing people at their worst. He listened to Carrie's story without interrupting, examined the documents Walter had provided, studied the summary of evidence with an expression that shifted from skepticism to interest to something approaching respect. "Mrs. Ashford," he finally said. "Mitchell." Carrie's voice was firm. "My maiden name is Mitchell." Hartley nodded slowly as if she had passed a test he hadn't announced. "Ms. Mitchell, are you prepared for what comes next? The Ashfords will fight. They'll try to destroy your reputation. They'll question your mental stability. They'll claim you're an unfit mother. They have resources most people can't imagine." "I understand. Do you?" Hartley leaned forward. "I've seen cases like this before. Wealthy families with something to hide. They don't fight fair. They fight to annihilate. They will hire private investigators to dig up every mistake you've ever made. They will plant stories in the media. They will turn your own friends against you if they can." Carrie placed her hand on her belly. The baby had been quiet today, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "They also have 30 years of crimes documented by the most detail-oriented accountant who ever lived," she said. "My father saw everything. He just waited until someone would listen. And that someone is you. That someone is me." Hartley studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw on her face seemed to satisfy him. "The first step is responding to the divorce petition. We'll contest the prenup on grounds of fraudulent inducement. If Bradley was hiding criminal activity during your marriage, the contract was entered under false pretenses. Will that work? It's a legal argument. Whether it works depends on the judge, the evidence, and how aggressively we pursue it." Hartley opened his laptop. "More importantly, we need to establish a clear timeline. When did Bradley begin his affair? When did he decide to end the marriage? Was the timing connected to any criminal activity he was trying to conceal?" Carrie remembered the conversation in the nursery, the clinical delivery, the mention of his lawyer already being informed, the way he had checked his Rolex like she was keeping him from something important. "He planned it," she said. "The divorce. He's been planning it for months." "What makes you say that?" "Because Bradley never does anything impulsively. He's calculated, controlled. The affair might have been spontaneous, but the exit strategy was absolutely intentional." She thought about the prenup, the emphasis on protecting Ashford assets, the way she had been encouraged to give up her career. "They wanted me dependent, vulnerable, easy to discard when I was no longer useful." Hartley typed rapidly. That narrative could be powerful in court. The wealthy husband who manipulated his wife into giving up her independence, then abandoned her during pregnancy. He looked up. "But we need more than narrative. We need proof. Check Bradley's communications around the time he convinced me to leave my job. 3 years ago, he said he wanted me to focus on starting a family. I believed him. And now? Now I think he was already planning for the day he'd want to get rid of me. A wife with no career, no savings, no separate identity is much easier to silence." The baby kicked, hard, almost like agreement. Hartley closed his laptop. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely certain you want to pursue this? The easy path is negotiating a settlement. I could probably get you more than Bradley's initial offer, enough to start over comfortably." Carrie thought about her father, about the 30 years he spent watching and waiting, about the letter he wrote knowing she would read it after he was gone. "My father spent his entire career holding powerful people accountable," she said. "He couldn't do it publicly, couldn't take credit, couldn't even tell his own daughter what he really did. But he believed that truth matters. And you believe that too? I'm starting to. Carrie met Hartley's eyes. Get me the best settlement you can, but prepare for war anyway. Because if Bradley thinks he can throw away his pregnant wife and face no consequences, he's about to learn what my father taught me. Which is? Carrie smiled. It was the first real smile she'd managed since the nursery. That quiet people notice everything, and eventually the truth comes out. That night, Carrie lay awake on Maggie's guest bed. The apartment was silent except for distant traffic and the occasional creak of old pipes. She stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks. 1, 2, 3, 4, as if cataloging imperfections could restore order to chaos. But this time the counting didn't calm her. This time it sharpened something. Her father had counted things for a living. Every number told a story. Every discrepancy revealed a secret. He had spent 40 years turning columns of figures into evidence of wrongdoing. And now his daughter held 30 years of those stories in her hands. The baby shifted. A slow, rolling movement that made Carrie's entire belly change shape. I'm going to name you after him, she whispered into the darkness. Margaret, after his mother. Rose, because he always brought me roses on my birthday. You're going to know who your grandfather was, sweetheart. I'm going to make sure of it. The baby kicked in response. Carrie closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would begin the process of dismantling her marriage. Tomorrow she would start building the case that would determine her daughter's future. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. But tonight, for just a few hours, she let herself grieve. Not for Bradley. She barely recognized the man who had stood in the nursery as someone she had loved. She grieved for the girl who had married him. The hopeful, trusting, desperately romantic girl who believed in fairy tales and happily ever afters. That girl was gone now. Someone else was emerging from the wreckage. Carrie didn't know yet who that person would be. Didn't know if she would like her. Didn't know if the transformation would leave her bitter or broken or something else entirely. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never let anyone make her feel worthless again. The conference room at Hartley's office had a view of Central Park. Carrie watched joggers circling the reservoir while she waited for Bradley and his lawyers to arrive. 2 weeks had passed since she found her father's box. 2 weeks of strategy sessions and document reviews and sleepless nights. 2 weeks of morning sickness that had nothing to do with the pregnancy and everything to do with stress. Maggie sat beside her, professional in a charcoal suit, her role today as friend rather than attorney. Hartley occupied the head of the table, files arranged with military precision. The door opened at exactly 2 o'clock. Bradley entered first, wearing the Navy suit he always wore for important meetings. Behind him came Richard Pennington, a silver-haired partner at one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. The kind of lawyer who billed more per hour than most people earned in a week. Bradley didn't look at Carrie as he sat down, didn't acknowledge her existence. He might as well have been meeting with strangers. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Pennington said smoothly. My client is eager to resolve this matter amicably. Is he? Hartley's voice was equally smooth, because his initial offer suggested he was eager to leave his pregnant wife destitute. The offer was in accordance with the prenuptial agreement, an agreement that was signed under fraudulent circumstances. Pennington's smile didn't waver. That's a bold claim, Mr. Hartley. Bold claims require bold evidence. Hartley slid a folder across the table. This is a summary of what we've uncovered regarding the Ashford family's financial activities. I suggest you review it before we proceed. Bradley finally looked up. His expression was bored, dismissive, the face of a man who believed himself untouchable. Pennington opened the folder, read the first page, the second, the third. The color drained from his face. This is... He glanced at Bradley. Where did you get this? My client's father was a forensic accountant. Hartley's voice remained perfectly calm. He worked with federal agencies for over 40 years. He was very thorough. Bradley grabbed the folder from his lawyer's hands, scanned the pages with increasing alarm. This is nonsense, he said. But his voice had lost its certainty. These documents could be fabricated. They could be. Hartley nodded agreeably. But they aren't. Every transaction, every shell company, every offshore account has been verified through independent sources. Your father's Cayman Islands accounts, The real estate purchases that never quite made sense. The construction contracts that went to companies owned by associates with questionable backgrounds. Bradley's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Am I? Hartley retrieved a single sheet of paper from his files. This is a bank statement from an account in your name, Mr. Ashford. An account your wife knew nothing about. An account that received transfers matching dates when suspicious real estate transactions occurred. He slid the paper across the table. Bradley stared at it like it was a live snake. That worthless card you told me to throw away? Carrie spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady, calmer than she had felt in years. It was the key to a safety deposit box. My father saw what you are, Bradley. He saw it before I did, and he prepared for this day. The room fell silent. Pennington looked like he wished he had never taken this case. Bradley's mask had slipped completely, revealing something ugly beneath. You wouldn't, he finally said. You'd destroy yourself in the process. Your name would be dragged through the mud alongside mine. I have nothing left to destroy. You made sure of that. The baby. Don't! Carrie's voice went cold. Don't you dare mention our daughter. You forfeited the right to care about her when you threw us away for a woman you'll discard in 2 years. Bradley's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Carrie saw something dangerous in his eyes, something she had never noticed before or had chosen not to see. What do you want? He asked through gritted teeth. I want the house. I want full custody. I want alimony and child support that reflects your actual income, not the scraps you've been hiding. Carrie leaned forward. And I want your mother to stay 1,000 feet away from me and my child, legally enforced. That's outrageous. Those are my terms. You have until Friday to accept. She stood, gathering her things. Otherwise, my attorney will be coordinating with federal investigators who are very interested in the Ashford real estate portfolio. She walked toward the door. Maggie followed. Hartley remained seated, calmly collecting his files. You'll regret this, Bradley called after her. His voice had turned ugly, desperate. I will make your life hell, Carrie. I will take that baby and make sure you never see her again. Carrie paused at the door, turned to face him one last time. You can try, she said quietly, but you should know something about my father, Bradley. He spent 40 years taking down men who thought they were untouchable. Men with more power, more money, more connections than you'll ever have. And he never lost. She left without looking back. In the elevator down, Carrie's hands finally started shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the meeting drained away, leaving her weak and trembling. She gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Maggie stood beside her, watching with concerned eyes but saying nothing. The elevator stopped on the 23rd floor. A woman got on, holding a coffee cup and scrolling through her phone. She didn't notice the pregnant woman having a controlled breakdown 2 feet away. Another stop, the 19th floor, a man in an expensive suit, humming something classical, completely oblivious. Normal people having normal days. Carrie watched them with something like wonder. How did they do it? How did they move through the world without feeling like it might collapse at any moment? The doors opened on the ground floor. Carrie forced her feet to move. 1 step, 2, through the lobby, past the security desk, out into the March sunshine. She stopped on the sidewalk, pressed her palm against her belly, breathed. That was incredible, Maggie said. I've never seen anyone handle Bradley like that. He looked terrified. He should be. Carrie's voice came out steadier than she felt. For the first time in his life, he's not in control. What happens now? Now we wait. Carrie started walking toward the subway. Either he accepts the terms and we settle, or he refuses and we go to war. Which do you think he'll choose? Carrie thought about the look in Bradley's eyes, the rage barely contained beneath the surface, the threat he had made about taking her daughter. War, she said. Bradley doesn't know how to lose. He'll burn everything down before he admits defeat. Maggie fell into step beside him. And you're ready for that? Carrie didn't answer immediately. She watched a mother pushing a stroller across the intersection. A little girl no more than 2, clutching a stuffed rabbit and laughing at something only she could see. That's what this is about, Carrie reminded herself. Not revenge, not vindication, protection. a future for her daughter free from the Ashford poison. I'm ready, she said finally. Whatever it takes. That night, Carrie took a long bath in Maggie's apartment. The water was too hot. The bathroom was too small. Nothing was comfortable at 7.5 months pregnant. But she soaked anyway. Watched the steam rise and curl against the ceiling. Let the heat seep into muscles that had been tense for weeks. Her father used to say that the best ideas came in the quiet moments, when the mind was still and the body was relaxed, when you stopped trying so hard and let understanding find you. What would you do, Dad? Carrie asked silently. How would you handle this? The answer came without words. A memory of her father at his desk, surrounded by papers and ledgers, never rushing, never panicking, just methodically working through the problem, one detail at a time. Patience, that's what he would say. Patience and precision. Bradley expected her to react emotionally, to make mistakes born of anger or fear. He was counting on the pregnant, abandoned wife to crumble under pressure. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Carrie wasn't the girl who had married him anymore. Wasn't the woman who had spent 5 years dimming herself to fit into his world. Wasn't the victim he had tried to create. She was Harold Mitchell's daughter. And Harold Mitchell never lost. Bradley didn't accept the terms. He escalated. The first article appeared 3 days after the meeting, a blind item on a gossip blog that specialized in wealthy New York families. Which real estate heir is being threatened by his unstable soon-to-be ex? Sources say pregnancy hormones have driven her to make outrageous accusations. Carrie read it on her phone while eating breakfast. The toast turned to sawdust in her mouth. This is just the beginning, Maggie warned. She had been monitoring the situation with the grim efficiency of someone who had seen ugly divorces before. They're testing the waters, seeing how you react. How should I react? You don't, not publicly. Everything goes through Hartley. Everything gets documented. You stay calm, stay focused, and let them punch themselves out. Easy to say, harder to do when more articles followed. Within a week, Carrie's name had appeared in 4 different publications. The tone escalated with each piece. Scorned wife makes outrageous claims against real estate heir. Pregnancy hormones or mental instability. Gold digger bride threatens to destroy family fortune. The comments were vicious. People she had never met calling her crazy, manipulative, a liar. Old photographs were dug up and recontextualized. A college Halloween costume where she dressed as a showgirl became evidence of her true character. They hired a PR firm, Hartley said during their next meeting. The messaging is too coordinated to be organic. Can we respond? We can, but carefully. Anything we say publicly could be used against you in court. He studied her with concern. How are you holding up? Carrie looked down at her hands. They were clasped in her lap, perfectly still. She had learned to control the visible signs of distress, but inside something was crumbling. I'm fine, she said. You're not. Maggie's voice was gentle but firm. No one would be fine. This is psychological warfare. What else can I do? I can't stop reading the articles. I can't pretend they don't exist. Every morning I wake up wondering what new lie they've planted. You could walk away, Hartley said quietly. Accept a settlement. End this before it destroys you. The baby kicked, a sharp, decisive movement. No, Carrie's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. Walking away is exactly what Bradley wants. He's counting on me to break, to give up, to prove that I'm the unstable, irrational woman his PR team is describing. And if you don't break, then eventually the truth comes out. That's what my father believed. That's what I'm betting on. Hartley exchanged a glance with Maggie. Whatever passed between them, they didn't share it. All right, Hartley said. Then we accelerate the timeline. I want to file a motion for discovery next week. Let's see how Bradley responds when we start subpoenaing his financial records. Dr. Stone's office was mercifully quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos that had become Carrie's daily life. The ultrasound showed a healthy baby, proper development, strong heartbeat, everything moving along as it should. But I'm concerned about your blood pressure, Dr. Stone said. She was a kind woman in her mid-40s, with the calm demeanor of someone who had guided countless mothers through difficult pregnancies. It's higher than I like. Are you managing your stress? Carrie almost laughed, almost. I'm trying, Trying isn't enough. Dr. Stone set down her chart. I've seen the news, Carrie. I know what you're dealing with. And I'm telling you as your doctor that this level of stress isn't good for you or the baby. What am I supposed to do? Pretend it isn't happening? No, but you need to find ways to protect yourself. Limit your media consumption. Delegate what you can. Rely on your support system. She paused. Do you have a therapist? I had one. Bradley convinced me to stop going. He said I didn't need it, that talking about my feelings too much was making me weak. Dr. Stone's expression darkened. I'm going to give you a referral. Someone who specializes in high-stress situations. I want you to call them this week. Carrie took the card, added it to the growing stack of business cards in her purse. Lawyer, forensic analyst, now therapist. Her life had become a collection of professionals helping her survive. The hospital visit came 3 weeks later. Carrie was at Maggie's apartment, reviewing documents with Hartley on a video call, when the first contraction hit. Not the gentle Braxton Hicks she had been experiencing for weeks. Something stronger, more urgent. Carrie? Maggie's voice seemed far away. You just went completely pale. I need... Carrie pressed her palm against her belly, waited. Another contraction, tighter than the first. I think something's wrong. The video call ended abruptly. Maggie was already grabbing her keys. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic lights, and Maggie's voice saying something reassuring. Carrie gripped the door handle and tried to breathe, tried to stay calm, tried to remember the relaxation techniques she had practiced. At 33 weeks, it was too early. The baby wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. The emergency room was a chaos of beeping machines and rushing nurses. They put her in a bed, attached monitors to her belly, asked questions she couldn't quite focus on. Then everyone left. Maggie was parking the car. The nurses were checking other patients. And Carrie was alone with the ceiling and the monitors and the overwhelming terror that something was terribly wrong. She cried, not the controlled tears she had learned to manage in public. Great, heaving sobs that shook the bed. The baby moved restlessly, responding to her distress, which only made her cry harder. I'm sorry, she gasped between breaths. I'm so sorry. You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask for a father who doesn't want you, or a mother who can't stop crying, or a life that's falling apart before you're even born. The baby kicked. Once, twice, 3 times. A message, a response. I'm here. I'm fighting too. Carrie pressed both hands against her belly and forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way the books taught, the way she had practiced. Slowly, slowly the sobs subsided. The door opened. A nurse entered. An older woman with kind eyes and efficient hands who moved around the room with the confidence of decades of experience. She checked monitors, adjusted pillows, took Carrie's vitals with gentle expertise, said nothing until Carrie's breathing had fully steadied. False labor, she finally announced. Baby's fine. Strong heartbeat. Everything looks good. Then why? Stress, the nurse's voice was matter of fact. Your body is telling you something. It's saying slow down, take care. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. The nurse paused, really looked at Carrie with the kind of seeing that came from years of reading patients. I don't know your story. Don't need to. But I know that look. The one that says you've been fighting alone so long you forgot it's okay to rest. Carrie opened her mouth to protest, to explain that she wasn't alone, that she had Maggie and Hartley and Walter, that she had a support system. But the words wouldn't come, because the nurse was right. In all the chaos of lawyers and evidence and media attacks, Carrie had forgotten to take care of herself, had forgotten that she was more than a weapon in a legal battle, that she was a person who needed rest and comfort in moments of peace. You're stronger than you know, the nurse said, but strong doesn't mean never stopping. It means knowing when to catch your breath. She patted Carrie's hand and left. Bradley arrived an hour later, not out of concern, not to check on the wife he had discarded. He came with papers. Carrie was alone again. Maggie had gone to get coffee. The nurses were elsewhere, and suddenly Bradley was standing in the doorway with a manila envelope in his hands and cold calculation in his eyes. Sign these, he said without preamble, and this all goes away. Carrie looked at him, really looked. The man she had married was gone. Maybe he had never existed, just a mask over something hungry and hollow. Get out. Just read them. He stepped closer, set the envelope on the bed beside her. Full settlement, generous child support, clean break. Sign the papers, and the media campaign stops. The custody fight ends. You get to raise your daughter in peace. In peace? Carrie picked up the envelope, opened it, scanned the contents with growing disbelief. This gives you visitation rights whenever you want. This lets your mother have unsupervised access. This says I can't speak publicly about you or your family ever again. Standard terms. This isn't a settlement, Bradley. This is a muzzle. It's the best you're going to get. His voice hardened. You think you have leverage? You think those documents your father compiled will save you? My lawyers are already building a case that they're fabricated. By the time we're done, you'll look like a mentally unstable woman who manufactured evidence to destroy her husband. I was in false labor. Carrie's voice was quiet. Dangerous. I'm lying in a hospital bed hooked up to monitors because the stress of what you're doing almost made me deliver early. And you show up with more threats? I'm showing up with a solution. Take it. Get out. Sign. Get out, or I tell the security you're harassing a patient in labor. For a long moment, Bradley didn't move. Something flickered in his eyes. Frustration, anger, the look of a man who wasn't used to being told no. Then he turned and walked away without another word. The papers remained on the bed. Carrie picked them up with shaking hands. Read through them more carefully, found exactly what she expected, a trap dressed as a gift. She pressed the call button for the nurse. I need these removed from my room, she said when the older woman returned. And if that man comes back, he isn't allowed anywhere near me. The nurse took the papers without comment, but her eyes lingered on Carrie's face with something like recognition. You're going to be okay, she said. Not a question, a statement. Whatever's happening, you're going to survive it. Carrie wished she believed that. The call came at 11 o'clock at night. Carrie was lying in Maggie's guest room, staring at the ceiling, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost let it go to voicemail. She was tired, so tired. Her body ached from the hospital visit. Her mind ached from everything else. But something made her answer. Is this Caroline Mitchell? A woman's voice, young, uncertain, familiar in a way Carrie couldn't immediately place. Who is this? My name is Tiffany Reeves. I was the younger model, the woman Bradley had left her for. Carrie's grip tightened on the phone. Why are you calling me? Because I need to tell you something. Tiffany's voice trembled. Something about Bradley, about what he's really like. Every instinct Carrie had screamed caution. This could be a trick, a way to gather information. Another weapon in Bradley's arsenal. But something in Tiffany's voice gave her pause. Something that sounded genuine. I'm listening. They met at a coffee shop in Queens 3 days later. Neutral territory, far from anywhere Bradley might have connections. Tiffany looked younger in person than she did in photographs. 26 years old, with the kind of beauty that photographed well, but revealed its fragility up close. Dark circles under her eyes, hands that couldn't stop moving. The nervous energy of someone who was afraid. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I know you have every reason to hate me. Carrie didn't respond to that. Couldn't, because the hate she expected to feel wasn't there. Just exhaustion and curiosity. Why are you here? Tiffany wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drew a shaky breath. He's not what I thought. When I started seeing him, I thought I was rescuing him from an unhappy marriage. That's what he told me. That you were cold, checked out, that you never wanted children. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Tiffany's voice dropped. It's easier, to be the hero of your own story, to think you're saving someone instead of breaking something. Carrie said nothing. Let the silence do its work. But then I saw how he treats people, the staff, the waiters, the doorman at his building. Like they're not quite human, like they exist only to serve him. Tiffany looked up. He started treating me that way too. Little comments about my weight, my clothes, my friends, always wrapped in concern, always for my own good. I know the pattern. I didn't, not until you stood up to him. Tiffany's eyes widened. When I heard about the meeting with the lawyers, when I saw how scared he was, I realized I wasn't special. I wasn't different from all the women who came before. I was just next in line. Tiffany nodded miserably. I found messages on his phone. 3 other women. At least 3. Probably more. He's been juggling us like we're interchangeable. Like none of us matter. Carrie felt something shift in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. Why are you telling me this? Tiffany reached into her purse, pulled out a manila envelope. Because you're fighting back. And maybe if I help you, I'm not just another victim. She slid the envelope across the table. Everything I have. Text messages, emails, voice recordings. He makes everyone around him sign NDAs, but I never signed one for things he said in our private conversations. Carrie didn't touch the envelope. What's your angle? My angle? Tiffany laughed. The sound was bitter. I want out. I want to walk away from this whole mess with something like dignity intact. And I want Bradley to face consequences for once in his life. She met Carrie's eyes. You're the only person who's ever made him scared. I want to be on the winning side. Carrie studied the younger woman, looking for deception, looking for the trap. She didn't find one. I don't trust you, Carrie said finally. You shouldn't. Tiffany pushed the envelope closer. But verify what's in there. Have your lawyers check it. If I'm lying, you've lost nothing. If I'm telling the truth, then Bradley has another enemy he didn't expect. Tiffany smiled. It was the first genuine expression Carrie had seen from her. Exactly. The envelope contained exactly what Tiffany promised. Text messages where Bradley discussed Carrie with contempt, where he called her a necessary inconvenience and planned how to manage her exit. Voice recordings of conversations where he admitted to hiding assets, laughing about how easy it was to fool his trusting little wife. This is devastating, Hartley said, reviewing the contents. Bradley incriminating himself in his own words. The court will love this. Can it be authenticated? Easily. The metadata is intact. Phone records will confirm the timeline. He looked up. Where did you get this? Tiffany Reeves. Hartley's eyebrows rose. The mistress? Former mistress. Apparently Bradley's talent for making enemies extends to his love interest. Maggie whistled low. I did not see that coming. Neither did Bradley. Carrie felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Something that might have been hope. That's the thing about treating people like they don't matter. Eventually they stop protecting you. Walter arrived in New York the following week. He brought one final file. They met at Maggie's apartment, the documents spread across the dining table like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. These are your father's personal notes, Walter said. Observations he made at your wedding. Concerns he documented but never shared. Carrie opened the file with trembling hands. Her father's handwriting filled page after page. The cramped, careful script she remembered from birthday cards and permission slips, and the note he left on her pillow when she went away to college. Bradley shows classic signs of narcissistic personality disorder, she read aloud. Charm that disappears the moment he doesn't get his way. I watched him interact with service staff at the reception. Dismissive, contemptuous. Carolyn doesn't see it. Love is blinding her. The words blurred. Carrie blinked hard. She seems diminished each time I see her, she continued. Smaller, quieter. She laughs at his jokes even when they're cruel. I tried to talk to her once, after they'd been married a year. She said I was imagining things, said Bradley was wonderful. Walter's hand covered hers, a gentle, fatherly gesture. He loved you more than anything, Walter said. He wanted you to be happy. When you weren't, when he couldn't make you see the truth, he did the only thing he could. He prepared. For 30 years, he prepared. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence, waiting for the day you would be ready to use it. Carrie closed the file, pressed it against her chest. I'm awake now, Dad, she whispered. I'm finally awake. That night, Carrie sat alone in the dark. The apartment was quiet. Maggie had gone to bed hours ago. The city hummed distantly through the windows. She held her father's notes in her lap. Read them again by the light of her phone. I can't make her see I tried. She loves him, or she thinks she does. But I can be ready for when she wakes up. All those years, all those silent dinners and awkward holidays and conversations that never quite went anywhere. Harold had been watching, documenting, preparing. Not because he wanted to destroy Bradley, not because he craved revenge, because he loved his daughter. And love meant being ready for the worst while hoping for the best. Carrie closed her eyes, let the tears fall. Her father had given her everything she needed. The evidence, the connections, the knowledge that she wasn't crazy, that her instincts had been right all along. Now it was up to her to use it. The call from Douglas Ashford came as a complete surprise. Carrie was in Hartley's office, reviewing the latest court filings, when the secretary interrupted with an unusual message. There's a Douglas Ashford on line 2. He says it's personal. Hartley and Carrie exchanged glances. Douglas was Bradley's father, the patriarch of the Ashford family, the man who had built the empire his son was trying to protect. What does he want? Carrie asked. He wouldn't say, just that he needs to speak with you directly. Every instinct screamed trap, but something about the request intrigued her. Put him through. Douglas's voice was thinner than she remembered, older, tired in a way that went beyond sleep. Caroline, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Ashford, she kept her voice neutral. This is unexpected. I imagine so. A pause, labored breathing. I need to meet with you in person, without my son's knowledge. Why would I agree to that? Because I have something you need, something that could end this whole ugly business. Another pause. And because I'm dying, I have perhaps 6 months left, if the doctors are right. I'd like to do one decent thing before I go. Carrie looked at Hartley. He was furiously scribbling on a notepad. Do not agree, potential trap. Where would we meet? Anywhere you choose. Bring your lawyer, bring security, bring whoever makes you feel safe. I'm not trying to hurt you, Caroline. I'm trying to make amends. She shouldn't trust him. Everything about this screamed manipulation, but something in Douglas's voice gave her pause, something that sounded like genuine regret. There's a restaurant in Connecticut, she said. Quiet, out of the way. I'll text the address to this number. I'll be there, alone. The line went dead. The restaurant was exactly as Carrie remembered. A converted farmhouse with low ceilings and dim lighting. The kind of place where conversations stayed private. Douglas arrived alone. As promised, he looked worse than the last time she had seen him. Gaunt, gray. The cancer was written across his features like a sentence. He sat across from her with visible effort, ordered coffee he wouldn't drink, folded his hands on the table. I'm not here to defend my son, he said without preamble, or to negotiate on his behalf. Then why are you here? Because I built something rotten. Douglas's eyes were distant, focused on something far away. I told myself it was for my family, for their future. The business grew, the money flowed, and I convinced myself that the ends justified the means. The fraud, the laundering, the criminal connections. All of it. He met her gaze. I was young when I started, hungry, convinced I was smarter than everyone else. By the time I realized what I had become, it was too late to stop. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. Douglas reached into his jacket, pulled out a small USB drive. But this might be the beginning of an apology. He slid it across the table. Everything, he said. Every account, every shell company, every transaction, including the ones your father missed. Harold was thorough, but he didn't have access to our internal systems. I do. Carrie didn't touch the drive. Why would you betray your own son? Because he's worse than I ever was. Douglas's voice cracked, more arrogant, less careful, and cruel in ways I never intended to teach him. He leaned forward. What he did to you, Caroline. Leaving his pregnant wife for a girl he'll discard in 2 years. It made me realize I don't want to die protecting a monster. He's your son. He's my creation. There's a difference. Douglas slumped back in his chair. The effort of the conversation was visibly draining him. I'm 70 years old. I have stage 3 cancer. The treatments aren't working. Whatever happens next, I won't be here to see it. So you're clearing your conscience. I'm trying to. Douglas studied her with something like admiration. You're stronger than anyone expected. Certainly stronger than Bradley expected. He thought you would crumble. Instead, you've made him more afraid than I've ever seen him. Carrie picked up the USB drive. It was lighter than she expected for something that could destroy an empire. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. Douglas pushed himself to his feet, left cash on the table for the coffee he never drank. Verify the drive. Have your father's colleague check every document. If I'm lying, you've lost nothing. If I'm telling the truth, then maybe one Ashford can finally do something right. Douglas smiled. It was a sad expression. The smile of a man facing his own mortality and finding himself wanting. Maybe, he said, maybe. He walked out without looking back. Walter verified the drive that evening. It's real, he said, his voice awed. More comprehensive than anything Harold compiled. Douglas gave you everything. Hartley studied the summary, whistled low. This isn't just a divorce case anymore. This is RICO territory, money laundering, tax evasion, wire fraud. He looked at Carrie. Are you sure you want to go this far? Once we give this to the feds, there's no going back. Carrie thought about the nursery, the elephants on the floor, Bradley's cold voice telling her she was nothing, the hospital, the threats, the endless campaign to destroy her reputation. Give them everything. This will make headlines. Your name will be dragged into it. The media will tear you apart. They're already tearing me apart. Carrie placed her hand on her belly. 8 months pregnant. The baby could come any day now. The difference is, after this, it ends. Bradley goes to prison. The Ashford empire crumbles. And my daughter grows up knowing that her mother stood up to monsters. Hartley and Maggie exchanged glances. Then we move forward, Hartley said. I'll coordinate with the federal prosecutor tomorrow. That night, Carrie lay awake in Maggie's guest room. Shadows moved across the ceiling. Distant sirens wailed and faded. Tomorrow, everything changed. Tomorrow, the evidence would be in the hands of people who could act on it. Tomorrow, Bradley's empire would begin to crumble. She should feel triumphant, vindicated, something. Instead, she felt hollow, grieving. Not for Bradley. She barely recognized that man as someone she had loved. She grieved for the girl who had married him, the hopeful, trusting girl who believed in fairy tales. That girl was gone now. Someone stronger was emerging from the wreckage. Someone harder. Someone who had learned that love wasn't always what it seemed, and that the people who were supposed to protect you would be the ones who hurt you most. Carrie placed her hands on her belly. The baby shifted, a slow, rolling movement that felt almost like reassurance. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I don't know how yet. I don't know what our life is going to look like, but we're going to survive this, and we're going to be okay. The baby kicked in response. For the first time in months, Carrie felt something like peace. The courtroom was fuller than expected. Bradley's lawyers had tried to keep the custody hearing closed, argued for privacy, for the protection of an unborn child. But somehow word had leaked. Reporters gathered outside. Cameras flashed. The Ashford name was about to become front-page news. Carrie arrived at 8:30 in the morning, 8 months pregnant, 3 weeks from her due date, moving with the careful deliberation of a woman whose body was no longer entirely her own. Maggie walked beside her. Hartley flanked her other side. Walter Brennan had come too, sitting quietly in the gallery like the ghost of her father come to witness the reckoning. Bradley was already seated at the opposing table. He looked diminished somehow. The confident swagger was gone. In its place was something brittle, desperate, the look of a man watching his world collapse and powerless to stop it. Evelyn sat behind him in the gallery. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. She had aged 10 years in the past few months. The judge called the proceedings to order. For the next 2 hours, lawyers argued. Evidence was presented. Testimony was given. Carrie sat with her hands folded over her belly and let the legal machinery grind forward. Hartley had prepared her for this. Every question, every objection, every attempt by Bradley's team to paint her as unstable, vindictive, unfit for motherhood. She answered each accusation calmly. Simply, the truth didn't need embellishment. Then it was time for her own testimony. Swap. Mitchell, the judge said. Her name was Patricia Holloway, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and the reputation for cutting through nonsense. Why do you want full custody of your daughter? Carrie took a breath. The baby kicked, as if offering encouragement. Because I know what it's like to be raised by a parent who sees you as an extension of themselves, she said. My husband doesn't want this child. He wants a trophy, an heir, a legacy. Our daughter deserves to be seen as a person, not a possession. How can you be certain you won't use the child as leverage in your dispute with Mr. Ashford? Carrie paused, considered the question, found the answer in a memory she hadn't thought about in years. When I was 7, my father gave me a broken pocket watch. It had belonged to his father. It didn't work, never would. But he said something I've never forgotten. She met the judge's eyes. He said some things aren't valuable because of what they do. They're valuable because of what they mean. Bradley's lawyer started to object. The judge silenced him with a look. My father spent 30 years preparing for this moment, Carrie continued, not because he hated my husband, but because he loved me. He documented crimes he could never prove in court. He prepared evidence he hoped I would never need. He did all of it knowing that if everything fell apart, his daughter would have a way to protect herself. She looked at Bradley. He was staring at her with naked hatred. That's what I want to give my daughter, not money, not status, not a legacy of lies and manipulation. I want to give her the certainty that someone loves her enough to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway made a note, glanced at the clock. We'll take a brief recess before... The courtroom doors swung open. 2 federal agents entered, followed by 4 more. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Bradley Ashford, the lead agent, approached the defendant's table. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The room erupted. Bradley's face went white, then red. He spun toward Carrie, rage distorting his features. You did this? His voice was ugly, desperate. You vindictive. Sir, step away from the witness. Agents positioned themselves between Bradley and Carrie. Handcuffs clicked into place. For one moment, their eyes met, his full of rage, hers full of nothing. The man she had married was gone. Maybe he had never existed, just a mask over something hungry and hollow. A performance that had fooled her for 5 years. She watched them lead him out, watched Evelyn collapse into hysterics, watched the cameras flash and the reporters shout questions, and the carefully controlled Ashford world dissolve into chaos, and felt nothing but calm. Outside the courthouse, Maggie found her sitting on a bench. The February air was cold enough to see their breath. How do you feel? Carrie considered the question, really considered it. Searched inside herself for triumph, vindication, satisfaction. Like I can finally exhale. Maggie sat beside her. The custody ruling will come down later today. Hartley thinks it's a sure thing, given everything that just happened. And the criminal case? Bradley's looking at significant prison time. Douglas's evidence was comprehensive. Add Tiffany's recordings and your father's documentation, and they have an airtight case. Carrie nodded. She should feel something. Why? Feel something. Instead, she felt empty, hollowed out, like she had been running for so long that stopping left her disoriented. What happens now? Now you rest. Maggie's voice was firm. You're 3 weeks from your due date. You've been through hell. Whatever comes next, it can wait. The baby kicked, a strong, decisive movement. She agrees with you, Carrie said. Maggie smiled. Smart kid. The custody ruling came down at 4:30 that afternoon. Full custody to Caroline Mitchell. Child support based on Bradley Ashford's actual assets, which were currently frozen pending investigation. Supervised visitation only, contingent on the outcome of criminal proceedings. Evelyn Ashford was specifically prohibited from unsupervised contact with the child. Every demand Carrie had made in that first meeting, every term Bradley had called outrageous, granted in full. You won, Hartley said, the closest to excited she had ever seen him. Completely and totally won. Carrie read the ruling twice, 3 times, waiting for it to feel real. It didn't. Not yet. What happens with his Westchester house? Already being handled. The property was purchased with commingled funds, so half the proceeds go to you per the revised settlement. Hartley checked his notes. Enough for a comfortable fresh start anywhere you want. Anywhere. The word felt foreign. For 5 years, Carrie's world had been defined by Bradley's orbit. His house, his family, his expectations. Now she was free to go anywhere. Be anyone. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating. I think I'd like to go home, she said. Pennsylvania, where my father lived. That can be arranged. Carrie stood, pressed her hands against her belly. Thank you, she said, for everything. For believing me when I must have seemed like a crazy pregnant woman with a box of old documents. Hartley shook his head. You're the furthest thing from crazy I've ever encountered. You're the reason people in my profession haven't completely lost faith in justice. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her in months. Margaret Rose Mitchell was born on March 15th at 4:17 in the morning. The labor lasted 22 hours. Difficult, complicated. There were moments when the doctors exchanged concerned glances and Carrie gripped at Maggie's hands so hard she was sure bones would break. But in the end, somehow, miraculously, there was a baby. A perfect, screaming, furious baby who wanted the world to know she had arrived. Carrie held her daughter for the first time, counted her fingers, her toes, traced the delicate shell of her ear, breathed in that impossible new baby smell that no one could adequately describe. Hello, Margaret, she whispered. I'm your mom. I've been waiting for you. The baby's eyes opened, dark blue like all newborns. She looked up at Carrie with something that might have been recognition, or might have been imagination. It didn't matter. In that moment, every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night became worth it. 3 months later, Carrie moved to Pennsylvania. The divorce was finalized, full custody confirmed, child support and alimony secured. The Westchester house had sold for more than expected, and half the proceeds sat in an account that Carrie still couldn't quite believe was hers. Bradley was out on bail, but facing trial. His lawyers kept delaying filing motions, seeking any avenue that might reduce his sentence. But the evidence was overwhelming. Douglas's USB drive, Tiffany's recordings, Harold's 30 years of documentation, 15 years. That was what the prosecutors were seeking. 15 years in federal prison. Evelyn had suffered a stroke shortly after Bradley's arrest. She now required full-time care in a facility that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. Carrie didn't feel sorry for her. She felt nothing at all. Douglas died quietly in hospice 2 months after their meeting. His final statement to prosecutors had sealed his son's fate. Carrie wasn't sure if that was redemption or cowardice or something in between. She bought a small house in the town where her father had lived. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a garden, a porch where she could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. Margaret's nursery was painted pale yellow, giraffes on the mobile instead of elephants. Cheerful and bright and completely Carrie's own choice. The letter arrived on Margaret's 3-month birthday. Walter had found it among Harold's papers, sealed with instructions to deliver it after the case was resolved. Carrie opened it at the kitchen table while Margaret napped in the next room. Carolyn, she read, her father's handwriting, even more precious now than before. If you're reading this, you made it through. I knew you would. You were always stronger than you believed. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from pain. I'm sorry I couldn't make you see what I saw. But I hope you understand now that seeing clearly isn't the same as being ready to act. You weren't ready before. You are now. Live your life, sweetheart. Not his life. Not the life you thought you should have. Your life. The one you'll build with your own hands. The watch on your dresser still doesn't work. Keep it anyway. Some things aren't valuable because of what they do. They're valuable because of what they mean. I love you. I always did. I always will. Dad, Carrie read the letter 5 times. Let the tears fall without trying to stop them. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in the box with his glasses and pen and the card that had saved her. She picked up the broken pocket watch from her dresser, held it to the light. Some things aren't valuable because of what they do. They're valuable because of what they mean. Margaret's first birthday party was small. Maggie came with her husband, Walter and his wife, Dr. Stone and her partner, a few new friends from the neighborhood, parents from the Mommy and Me class Carrie had joined. The garden was decorated with streamers and balloons. The weather cooperated, delivering a warm spring afternoon that felt like a gift. Margaret sat in her high chair, covered in cake, laughing at nothing in particular. She had Carrie's eyes and Harold's stubborn chin, a perfect blend of past and future. "She's beautiful," Maggie said, watching the chaos with a fond smile. "You did good, Mama." "We did good." Carrie leaned against her friend. "I couldn't have survived without you." "Of course you could have. You were the strongest person I know." Carrie shook her head. "I'm the most stubborn person you know. There's a difference." Maggie laughed. "Fair enough. Say, a journalist called that evening. The sentencing had happened the week before. Bradley Ashford, 15 years in federal prison. His mother had died without seeing him free again. The journalist wanted an interview. The woman who had brought down the Ashford empire, the pregnant wife who had fought back and won. Carrie declined. "I don't have anything left to say about Bradley Ashford," she told the disappointed reporter. "That chapter of my life is closed." She hung up and returned to the party. Margaret Rose Mitchell was born on March 15th at 4:17 in the morning. The labor began at 6 o'clock the previous evening. Carrie had been folding baby clothes in Maggie's guest room, arranging tiny onesies and impossibly small socks into neat piles when the first contraction hit. Not the false labor that had sent her to the hospital weeks before. Something different. Something real. "Maggie," her voice came out surprisingly calm. "I think it's time." The next 22 hours blurred into a haze of pain and fear and determination. Maggie stayed by her side through every contraction, held her hand, wiped her forehead, reminded her to breathe when the agony made her forget. Dr. Stone arrived at the hospital within the hour. Her calm presence steadied everyone in the room. "You're doing beautifully," she said during hour 14, when Carrie was convinced she couldn't continue. "Your daughter is almost here." There were complications. The baby's heart rate dropped twice. Doctors exchanged concerned glances that Carrie tried not to interpret. At one point, they discussed an emergency cesarean section, and Carrie felt terror unlike anything she had experienced during the divorce or the custody battle or any of the horrors Bradley had inflicted. This was different. This was her daughter's life. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular, to God, to her father, to the universe. "Please let her be okay." And then at 4:17 in the morning, after one final push that emptied Carrie of every ounce of strength she possessed, a baby's cry filled the room. The sound was furious, indignant, the unmistakable protest of a tiny person announcing her arrival to a world that had not asked permission. "She's perfect," Dr. Stone said, placing the squirming, screaming bundle on Carrie's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Carrie looked down at her daughter for the first time. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A thatch of dark hair plastered to her head. Eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights. A mouth open wide, demanding attention, demanding acknowledgement, demanding everything the world had to offer. "Hello, Margaret," Carrie whispered. Her voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm your mom. I've been waiting for you." The baby's cries softened. Her eyes opened, dark blue like all newborns, but Carrie could already see hints of something familiar. Her father's intensity, her mother's determination. "She has Harold's chin," Maggie said, leaning over to look. "That stubborn little chin?" Carrie laughed through her tears. "She does." Margaret's tiny hand found Carrie's finger, gripped it with surprising strength, a connection that felt ancient and new all at once. "I'm going to take such good care of you," Carrie promised. "I'm going to give you everything I never had. Honesty, safety, the truth about who your family really is." She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "And I'm going to tell you about your grandfather, every single day, so you know where you came from." The baby made a soft sound, content, satisfied, as if she understood every word. Iran. The hospital room filled with flowers over the next 2 days. Maggie brought roses, yellow ones because Carrie had mentioned once that they were her favorites. Walter Brennan sent a stunning arrangement of lilies with a card that simply read, "Harold would be so proud. Welcome to the world, little one." Dr. Stone stopped by during her rounds, not as a physician but as a friend. She held Margaret with the ease of someone who had delivered thousands of babies but still found each one miraculous. "You did something incredible," she told Carrie. "Not just the birth, everything. Fighting for yourself when most people would have given up." "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." Dr. Stone handed the baby back. "You chose to fight. That makes all the difference." James Hartley called with the updates on the legal proceedings. Bradley's trial date had been set. The evidence was overwhelming. His lawyers were already discussing plea deals. "He's going away for a long time," Hartley said. "You don't have to worry about him anymore." Carrie looked at her sleeping daughter, so small, so perfect, so completely unaware of the chaos that had surrounded her arrival. "I stopped worrying about Bradley the day I realized he never loved me," she said. "What I worried about was giving my daughter a life free from his shadow. That's what I fought for. And you won." "We won." Carrie adjusted the blanket around Margaret. "All of us, my father, Walter, Maggie, you, even Douglas in his way. It took a village to bring down the Ashfords." Hartley laughed. "That's one way to put it." The day Carrie brought Margaret home to Maggie's apartment was the day everything finally felt real. She carried her daughter through the door, set the car seat on the coffee table, stood in the middle of the living room and looked around at the space that had been her refuge for the past 6 months. "This is temporary," she told Margaret. "We're going to find our own place soon. Somewhere with a garden, somewhere you can grow up soft and happy." The baby slept on, oblivious to her mother's promises. Maggie appeared with 2 cups of tea, set one beside Carrie, settled onto the couch. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying." Carrie picked up her cup, breathed in the steam. "Wonderful. Like everything has changed and nothing has changed all at once." "That sounds about right." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and traffic and the distant rumble of the subway. "I've been thinking," Carrie said finally, "about where I want to raise her." "Not New York?" "No." Carrie shook her head. "Too many memories, too much noise. I want somewhere quieter, somewhere she can play outside without me worrying every second." "Where?" "Pennsylvania, my father's town." Carrie met Maggie's eyes. "I know it's far. I know I'll be leaving you behind. But it feels right, like going home, even though I've never really lived there." Maggie reached over, squeezed her hand. "I think Harold would love that." 3 months later, Carrie loaded her car with boxes and drove south. The house she had bought was small, but perfect. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a backyard that sloped down to a creek where she imagined Margaret playing as she grew older. The previous owners had left a swing hanging from the old oak tree. Carrie pushed it gently, listening to the creak of the chains, and felt something settle inside her. Peace. After everything. Peace, oape. Margaret's nursery was painted pale yellow, giraffes on the mobile instead of elephants, a rocking chair by the window where Carrie could sit and watch the stars come out. She assembled the crib herself this time. No Bradley to supervise, no Evelyn to criticize, just Carrie and her tools and the satisfaction of creating something with her own hands. When she finished, she stood back and admired her work. "Not bad," she said to Margaret, who was watching from her bouncy seat. "Your mama is pretty handy." The baby gurgled in what might have been agreement. The first weeks in the new house were an adjustment. Carrie learned the sounds of the old building, the way the pipes groaned in the morning, the creak of the third step on the staircase, the particular whistle of wind through the kitchen window when storms approached. She learned the rhythms of small-town life, the grocery store where everyone knew everyone, the coffee shop where the owner remembered her order after the second visit, the park where other mothers gathered with their children and slowly, cautiously, welcomed her into their circle. She learned to be alone in a way she had never been before. Not lonely, alone. There was a difference, she discovered. Loneliness was painful, empty, a hollow ache in the chest. Being alone was something else, something that could be peaceful, even nourishing, when you were comfortable with who you were. And for the first time in her adult life, Carrie was comfortable with who she was. She wasn't Bradley Ashford's wife anymore. Wasn't the woman who had dimmed herself to fit into someone else's world. Wasn't the victim, the cautionary tale, the tragic figure. She was Caroline Mitchell. mother, survivor, daughter of a man who had spent his life fighting for truth. That was enough. More than enough. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday in June. Carrie received the notification by email, a PDF attachment with her signature and Bradley's, the official end of a marriage that had already been dead for longer than she wanted to admit. She read through the document once, the terms she had demanded, the custody arrangement, the financial settlement, everything she had fought for, recorded in legal language and stamped with the court's seal. She should feel something: relief, triumph, closure. Instead, she felt nothing. The marriage had ended in that nursery when Bradley told her she wouldn't be needing the mobile. The paperwork was just formality, the legal acknowledgement of something that had died long before. Carrie closed her laptop, walked outside to where Margaret was playing on a blanket in the backyard. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak tree, casting dancing shadows across the grass. "It's official," she told her daughter. "You and me. Just us." Margaret looked up at the sound of her mother's voice, smiled that gummy, toothless smile that never failed to melt Carrie's heart. "Just us," Carrie repeated, "and that's more than enough." Bradley's trial began in September. Carrie didn't attend, didn't watch the news coverage, didn't read the articles that dissected every detail of the Ashford Empire's collapse. She had lived through the reality. She didn't need to relive it as spectacle. But Maggie kept her informed, called with updates after each day of testimony. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Douglas's evidence, Tiffany's recordings, Harold's 30 years of documentation, witnesses who had been too afraid to come forward until they saw the tide turning against the Ashfords. Bradley's lawyers tried every tactic, claimed the evidence was fabricated, accused Carrie of manipulating his father and his mistress, painted a picture of a vindictive wife who had orchestrated the destruction of an innocent man. The jury didn't buy it. "Guilty on all counts," Maggie reported on the day the verdict came in. "Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy." Carrie was in the kitchen feeding Margaret pureed carrots. The baby had recently discovered solid food and approached each new taste with the seriousness of a food critic. "How long?" Carrie asked. "Sentencing is next month. The prosecutors are pushing for 15 years. 15 years. Margaret would be in high school before her father was free. "How do you feel?" Maggie asked. Carrie wiped orange goo from Margaret's chin, considered the question. "I feel like it's over. Finally, completely over. He can't hurt us anymore." "That's it? No satisfaction? No vindication?" "Maybe a little," Carrie smiled. "But mostly I'm just tired of thinking about him. I want to move forward, build something new." "You've already built something new." Maggie's voice was warm. "Look at yourself, Carrie. A year ago you were homeless and pregnant, and everyone was betting against you. Now you've got a house, a daughter, a whole new life. That's not nothing." "It's not nothing," Carrie agreed. "It's everything." The sentencing hearing happened on a crisp October morning. Carrie wasn't there, but Walter was. He called her afterward with a full report. Bradley Ashford, 15 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 12. "He made a statement," Walter said, "apologized for his crimes, said he took full responsibility." "Did he mention me?" "No, he didn't mention you or Margaret at all." Carrie nodded, even though Walter couldn't see. That sounded right. Even at the end, Bradley couldn't acknowledge what he had done to his family, could only see himself as the victim of circumstances, never the architect of his own destruction. "What about Evelyn?" "She passed away last week. The stroke complications." Bradley asked for compassionate release to attend the funeral. It was denied. Carrie closed her eyes, searched inside herself for sympathy, found nothing. "Is it wrong that I don't feel sorry for any of them?" "No," Walter's voice was gentle. "It's not wrong. You feel what you feel. Harold would tell you the same thing." "I wish he was here." The words came out before Carrie could stop them. "I wish he could see Margaret. I wish he could know that everything he prepared, everything he sacrificed, it worked." "He knows," Walter's voice caught. "Wherever he is, Caroline, he knows, and he's proud of you." November brought Margaret's first Thanksgiving. Carrie cooked a small turkey, made mashed potatoes from scratch. baked a pumpkin pie using her grandmother's recipe, retrieved from a box of old papers she had found among her father's things. The dining room table felt too big for two people, so she set up a smaller table in the kitchen, placed Margaret in her high chair, arranged the food like a magazine spread. Our first holiday, she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider and a toast. Just us, but next year we'll have more people, I promise. Margaret banged her spoon against her tray, her contribution to the celebration. Carrie laughed, took a bite of turkey, felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for longer than she could remember. Gratitude. That's what this was. Pure, simple gratitude for being alive, for being free, for having this moment with her daughter in a house that belonged to them. The email from Judge Holloway arrived in early December. Carrie read it 3 times before the words fully registered. A job offer. An invitation to use the skills she had developed during the worst year of her life. A chance to help others the way Harold had helped her. She thought about it for 2 weeks, called Maggie for advice. Take it, Maggie said without hesitation. You were born for this. Called Walter for perspective. Your father would be honored, he said. His work, continuing through you. It's what he always hoped for. Called Dr. Stone for practical guidance. Make sure they offer good childcare benefits, she said. And don't let them work you to death. Margaret needs you healthy. On Christmas Eve, Carrie made her decision. The night before she sent her reply, Carrie sat in her living room with Margaret asleep in her arms. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner. Lights she had strung herself, ornaments she had chosen, a star on top that had belonged to her father. Snow fell gently outside the windows, fat, lazy flakes that drifted down like feathers, coating the world in white. Carrie looked at her daughter's face, so peaceful in sleep, so unaware of everything that had led to this moment. I'm going to go back to work, she whispered. Not because I need the money or because I'm bored, because I want to help people, because your grandfather spent his whole life uncovering truth, and someone needs to continue that work. Margaret stirred, made a soft sound. But you come first, always. Whatever I do, wherever I go, you will always come first. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, breathed in the sweet baby smell that she knew wouldn't last forever. I'm going to tell you about him, sweetheart, about Harold Mitchell, the quiet man who noticed everything, the patient man who prepared for decades, the loving man who gave up recognition and glory so his daughter could have a weapon when she needed it most. The fire crackled, the snow continued falling, and I'm going to teach you what he taught me. That truth matters, that preparation matters, that love isn't just words and feelings, it's action, it's showing up, it's doing the hard work even when no one sees it. Margaret's eyes opened, dark blue lightening now to something that might become brown or green or hazel. No one could say yet what color they would settle into, but the expression in them was pure Harold, watchful, curious, taking everything in. Some things aren't valuable because of what they do, Carrie said, the words her father had spoken so many years ago. They're valuable because of what they mean. She looked at the broken pocket watch on the mantel, still not working, never would work, but precious beyond measure. She looked at her daughter, small and warm and absolutely perfect. You mean everything, she whispered. Everything I went through, everything I survived. It was all for you, so you could exist, so you could have a life free from noise and manipulation and the Ashford poison. Margaret gurgled, reached up with one tiny hand. And I promise you this, Carrie caught her daughter's fingers, kissed them one by one. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are, how wanted you are, how much your existence changed everything for the better. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. Margaret woke at 6, too young to understand presents, but old enough to be fascinated by the wrapping paper. She sat on a blanket in front of the tree, methodically shredding tissue paper while Carrie filmed her with her phone. Your first Christmas, Carrie narrated, and you've discovered that the paper is more interesting than the toys. Classic baby move. The doorbell rang at 10. Carrie opened it to find Maggie on the porch, arms full of gifts, grinning like a child. Surprise! What are you doing here? I thought you were spending Christmas with the Marks family. Change of plans. Maggie swept past her into the house. Mark's parents came down with the flu, so I got a free pass. And I wasn't about to spend Margaret's first Christmas alone in my apartment. She dropped the gifts under the tree and scooped up the baby, who squealed with delight at seeing her honorary aunt. You drove 4 hours on Christmas morning? 3.5. I left at dawn. Maggie settled onto the couch with Margaret. Now, are you going to stand there looking shocked, or are you going to make me coffee? Carrie laughed. The first genuine, full-body laugh she had managed in longer than she could remember. Coffee coming up. The day unfolded in lazy warmth. Maggie had brought too many presents. Toys Margaret wouldn't be able to use for months. Clothes in sizes she wouldn't fit into for years. A first edition of Goodnight Moon that must have cost a fortune. It's too much, Carrie protested. It's not nearly enough. Maggie bounced Margaret on her knee. This kid deserves to be spoiled rotten after everything her mother went through. They cooked together. Turkey and stuffing in the green bean casserole that had been a staple of every holiday meal Carrie could remember. The kitchen filled with the smells of home and family and celebration. Over dinner, Maggie asked about the job offer. I'm taking it, Carrie said, starting in January. They're letting me work remotely most days so I can be home with Margaret. That's amazing, Maggie raised her glass. To Caroline Mitchell, investigator, truth seeker, all-around badass. Carrie clinked her glass against Maggie's. I'm not a badass. You took down a criminal empire while 7 months pregnant. You're the definition of badass. Margaret chose that moment to spit up on her holiday dress. Both women burst out laughing. That night, after Maggie had retired to the guest room and Margaret was sleeping soundly in her crib, Carrie sat at her kitchen table and composed her reply to Judge Holloway. Thank you for this opportunity, she wrote. I'm honored to accept. A year ago, I was a different person, broken, scared, convinced that I was worthless without the man who had promised to love me. My father saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He prepared for decades, building an arsenal of truth that he hoped I would never need. When I finally needed it, it saved my life. Now I want to help others the way he helped me. I want to be the voice for women who are trapped, the weapon for families who have been destroyed by greed, the truth seeker in a world that rewards lies. I don't know if I'm qualified. I'm not a lawyer or an accountant or a professional investigator. I'm a mother who learned to fight because the alternative was losing everything. But I know how to read documents. I know how to spot inconsistencies. I know how to be patient and thorough and relentless. Most importantly, I know what it feels like to be alone against something much bigger than yourself. And I know the difference that one person, one prepared, dedicated, stubborn person can make. I'm ready to begin. Caroline Mitchell, she hit send. New Year's Eve came cold and clear. Carrie bundled Margaret in her warmest clothes and carried her onto the back porch. The night sky stretched overhead, vast and star-studded, unpolluted by city lights. Look up, sweetheart, she whispered. See all those stars? Your grandfather used to tell me that every star was a truth waiting to be discovered. A secret the universe was keeping until someone patient enough came along to find it. Margaret gazed upward with wide eyes. Whether she understood or simply enjoyed the sparkling lights, Carrie couldn't say. He was a good man, your grandfather. Quiet, patient, the kind of person who noticed things others missed. He never got famous or rich or recognized for what he did. But he mattered. What he did mattered. The clock inside the house showed 11:58. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks were beginning, bursts of color against the dark sky. I used to think I needed someone to complete me, Carrie continued. I thought that's what marriage was, two halves becoming whole. But I was wrong. Margaret cooed softly. I was always whole. I just forgot. I let someone convince me I was broken, and I believed him because it was easier than believing in myself. 11:59. But you're going to know different. From the very beginning, you're going to know that you're enough, that you don't need anyone's approval or permission to be who you are, that the only person who gets to define your worth is you. Midnight, fireworks exploded across the sky, red and gold and brilliant white, painting the darkness with celebration. Happy New Year, Margaret Rose Mitchell. Carrie pressed a kiss to her daughter's cold cheek. Happy New Year, Dad, wherever you are. Thank you for everything." The baby reached toward the fireworks with tiny grasping fingers. Carrie held her close and watched the sky fill with light. Margaret's first birthday party was perfect. Not perfect in the Pinterest, Instagram, everything coordinated in photogenic sense. Perfect in the way that mattered. Full of love and laughter and people who genuinely cared. Maggie came, of course. Drove the 4 hours with a car full of presents and a cake she had special ordered from a bakery in Manhattan. Walter and his wife made the trip from Connecticut. The old man teared up when he saw Margaret, now walking unsteadily and babbling in the nonsense language of toddlers. "She looks like Harold," he said, his voice thick. "Around the eyes, that same watchfulness." Dr. Stone came with her partner, a woman named Janet who owned a pottery studio and immediately won Margaret's heart by letting her play with a lump of clay. New friends from the neighborhood appeared throughout the afternoon. Parents from the Mommy and Me class, the owner of the coffee shop, the librarian who always saved the newest picture books for Margaret, the backyard filled with streamers and balloons. The old oak tree provided shade. Children ran and laughed while adults mingled and ate cake. Carrie stood on the porch watching it all and felt her heart expand to hold more joy than she had thought possible. This is what I fought for, she realized. Not the house or the money or even the victory over Bradley. This, a community, a family, a life filled with people who show up because they want to, not because they have to. "Penny for your thoughts." Maggie appeared beside her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Just grateful." Carrie accepted the glass. "A year ago, I was terrified that Margaret would grow up without anyone who loved her except me. Now look at this. Look at all these people. They're here for you too, you know, not just her." Carrie shook her head. "They're here because of her. She's the one who brought us all together. She's the reason, but you're the cause." Maggie nudged her shoulder. "You built this, Carrie. You chose to move here, to put down roots, to let people in. That's not nothing." "It's not nothing," Carrie agreed. "It's everything." That evening, after the guests had gone and the backyard was cleaned and Margaret was sleeping in her crib, Carrie sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. Stars began to emerge, first one, then dozens, then thousands. She thought about the year that had passed, the job she had started, the cases she had worked, the people she had helped. Small victories mostly, documents uncovered, truths revealed, families given the weapons they needed to fight back. None of it had made headlines. None of it had brought recognition or fame. But it mattered. Every case mattered to someone. She thought about Bradley in prison, still blaming everyone but himself, still unable to acknowledge what he had done, still trapped in the same patterns that had destroyed his marriage and his family and his freedom. She didn't hate him anymore, didn't feel anything about him at all. He was a chapter that had ended, a book that had closed, a story she no longer had any interest in reading. She thought about her father, the quiet man who had given her everything she needed without ever asking for anything in return, the patient man who had waited decades for her to be ready, the loving man who had trusted her to find her way in her own time. "I did it, Dad," she whispered to the darkening sky. "I survived. I thrived. I turned your truth into something that helps other people." A firefly blinked in the garden, then another. Soon the yard was filled with their gentle light. "And I'm raising your granddaughter to be just like you, patient, watchful, someone who notices things others miss." She pulled the broken pocket watch from her pocket. She carried it everywhere now, a talisman, a reminder. Some things aren't valuable because of what they do. They're valuable because of what they mean. She held the watch against her heart. "You meant everything, Dad. You still do. And I promise, as long as I live, your work continues. Your legacy lives on. Through me, through you, through Margaret, through everyone we help find their way back to the truth." The fireflies danced, the stars burned, the night wrapped around her like a blanket. And Carrie Mitchell sat on her porch, in her house, in the life she had built from the wreckage of everything she had lost, and felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Not hope for rescue or salvation or someone else to fix things. Hope in herself, hope in her daughter, hope in the future they would build together. One day at a time, one truth at a time, the broken watch ticked silently in her hand. Some things weren't valuable because of what they did. They were valuable because of what they meant. And this life, this moment, this everything, it meant the world. And that is how a worthless card became the key to everything. Carolyn Mitchell walked into that marriage believing in fairy tales. She walked out believing in herself. Her father, Harold, never got to meet his granddaughter, Margaret, never got to see his 30 years of preparation finally pay off. But his legacy lives on, in his daughter, in his granddaughter, in every oath that refuses to stay buried. Some things are not valuable because of what they do. They are valuable because of what they mean. If this story moved you, if you felt Caroline's pain and cheered for her victory, I would be so grateful if you would hit that like button. It tells me that stories like this matter to you. And if you have not subscribed yet, join our family. We share stories of strong women who refuse to be broken, women who fight back, women who find their power in the darkest moments. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part of Caroline's journey hit you the hardest. Was it the moment Bradley told her she was nothing? The discovery of her father's secret? Or the day she finally held her daughter and knew everything had been worth it? I read every single comment. Your words keep me going. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who feels trapped. Someone who thinks they have no options. Someone who needs to know that worthless things can become weapons and broken women can become unstoppable. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, the truth always comes out, and quiet people notice everything. See you in the next story.